Welcome to the Omi Show. I am Omi Bell, and I'm here with the awesome Vivace Maxvictor, and I can't wait to hear a story about being fearless, about being confident, about life coaching, about real estate, all of the things. And we're going to get into like what it feels like to work with certain realms and work with certain people and just hear all about her. So first, I want to start with, you could be doing anything in the world. You could be sailing the seven seas. You could be climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. You could be working with children in other countries. You could be owning your own school. You could be doing anything. You could be an astronaut. You could be anything. Why did you decide to get into real estate, and why did you decide to get into life coaching?
Okay, so I got to tell you the backstory. So the backstory is I came from a family of incredible amount of trauma and violence. There was tremendous amount of domestic violence against me and my mother specifically, and there were all other types of abuses. So I grew up being always afraid, feeling broken, feeling powerless, feeling insecure, feeling just like a zero, unseen, unheard, unappreciated. My goal in life was to have no man control me. So that was my driving force when I went to go into a career. So we eventually left my dad. It took many years for my mom to gain the courage. We left my dad. We used to live in Iran. Then we lived in London. Then we moved to LA. We got to LA at night. My dad beat up my mom in the morning and said, if you don't like it, leave. So my mom and I were in a new country he gave me $100 with $100 and we were homeless. And so I really had this driving force of having a career that I could rely on, having an income that I could rely on so that this would never, ever happen to me again. And so it was very challenging for my mom and I to be in a new country with my $100 and nowhere to go. So eventually, fast forward, when it came time to go to school, I did my undergrad in biology. I figured if I go the medical route, I'll always have a safe job. And I hated biology, but I felt, I chose a lot of my decisions were fear-based decisions and there were survival-based decisions. And so I did biology, I hated it. Then I got my master's in biology and I hated it. Then I continued and I went to Cornell Medical School. I graduated as a surgical PA. I worked in medicine for 12 years and I didn't enjoy it. During all this time, I never got any sort of help for all the trauma that I had been through. I just ignored it and I kept pursuing academic pursuits and moving forward. And then I was drugged and sexually assaulted. And after that, I became suicidal. And after that, I had to face everything that I had ignored my whole life. And it was the first time that I asked for help. Once I was able to, I call it picking my own expiration date. I picked my own expiration date. Once I was able, I say, grace saved my life, and I got through that and I got to the other side. I left my medical career to do the same for others. So I thought that there's so many people who are suffering. And finally, when I learned how to heal myself and how to help myself from a deep, deep, deep layer of many layers of years of unhealed wounds, I became really inspired to do the same for others. So I left my career, I started coaching, and that's how I got here. And I find that it's invaluable and sacred to participate in someone else's journey and helping them have self-confidence after trauma.
Wow. Okay, I don't know what I thought you was gonna say, but
now you know why I'm not an astronaut.
Yeah, now I know. Okay, your purpose, it sounds like you're leaning right into what you feel like is purposeful for you. I love that so much. I think so. Where does the real estate part come in?
So the real estate part it was just actually random. I left my medical career. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to get clients. I couldn't go back to my medical people that I knew. I needed random people to come to my presentations. I thought to myself, how can I get people to come? If I do 10 seminars once a month for 10 consecutive months in a hotel, and if people come, I'll get coaching clients. Now, I didn't know how to do any of this. And at the time I had student loans and I had no money. So this was in 2011. I'd go to the printer, they'd print out 4 ads on a 8.5 by 11 cardstock. It was 25 cents each because that's what I could afford. We'd had 4 of those and I would literally give it to strangers in the street. So if somebody asked me, where's Fifth Avenue? I'd be like, it's that way. And I have a seminar, you should come. And I comped virtually everybody +2 just to get bodies in the room. So I'd be like, oh my God, I have a seminar, you should come, comp +2. All the tellers at Capital One Bank came, any waiter or waitresses came, any human who spoke to me during that period of time, I was like, you have to come to my seminar. Meanwhile, I didn't have content. And I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew these people had to come. And so in all my efforts to spread seeds all over the universe, because I was so desperate, some realtors came. And I started to coach these realtors. And there was this one lady, she changed my life. Her name was Lisa. She came, I started coaching her. She introduced me to her manager by email and said, oh my God, I went to this girl seminar. It's amazing. You should bring her in. The manager was like, who's this girl? We've never heard of her, because it's a big brand. It's Douglas Elliman Real Estate. They're used to big names. And I was a nobody. I was sitting in my apartment with student loans. And so he politely wrote something back on the email. And I thought, who are these realtors? I have nothing to do with realtors. I politely wrote something back, but I was happy that this Lisa girl was coaching because I needed clients. So the next month, Lisa brings her friend Karen. I also worked in real estate in the same office. So I coach Karen. Lisa and Karen then bring this guy, Jordan, and I coached the three of them, and suddenly they made a lot of money. And so their manager independently went to them and said, what are you doing? How are you guys making so much money? And Lisa was like, that girl is coaching us. So then the manager said, get that girl in here. So I went and I did a presentation. I knew nothing about real estate, but I knew about mindset, and I know about self-esteem. And I know if your mindset and your self-esteem are wrong, you can't do any type of transaction, real estate or otherwise. So I would use the techniques that I had learned to heal myself in looking at what stopped them in doing a transaction and multiplying their income. I just tilted it towards that objective. And then all these people signed up for coaching. Like there was a huge, like a boardroom looking thing, a round table long, and all these people signed up. And then Jeff became my brand ambassador, and he introduced me to all these other real estate companies. So Corcoran, Compass, Brown Harris Stevens, Halstead, like every major real estate company was like, we don't know what you're doing. Come to our office, do a presentation. So it became a thing. And then the Real Estate Board of New York was like, will you be on our panels? And I was like, sure, if you let me. So then I was on a bunch of real estate panels. And then I was on $1 Million Listing New York because my client was on it. And then I was on Buying Beverly Hills, a Netflix show. So real estate was God's plan. I just took the first step.
I love that. What? So talk to me a little bit about what it meant, like from a mindset standpoint, to charge at a certain level. Because I think like after you've gone through a lot of trauma, you kind of get to a place where you are now running a business. Some of that trauma or that fear still threads throughout your offerings or threads throughout
100%.
what you're willing to ask for. So talk to me a little bit about in the beginning, what were you charging? Was there some type of moment where you're like, I need to go, $15,000 for a coaching package versus $149 or $2,000 or $5,000? Like, what was the money journey there?
The money journey was really, really, really hard for me because, again, I had tremendous amount of financial pain and financial fear, and a lot of the abuse in my family was financially related. So there was like financially incentivized beatings. And so I can send a link to my backstory. You can have it for your viewers, but it was tremendous amount of trauma specifically attached to money. So, and I still had student loans. I didn't know if this coaching thing would work. I didn't know how to have a business. I knew how to be a surgical PA. I knew how to be in the operating room. I knew how to suture patients. I knew how to write prescriptions. I knew how to do pre-op, intra-op, post-op care. I didn't know coaching or running a business. So you're correct. The financial thing was a huge, extra major challenge for me since I had so much wounds and sensitivity around it. But I was just like, what can I do to get a whole bunch of people in? And I encourage people to do this, and people don't want to do this because people want to start at the top, and you don't get to start at the top. You got to start where you start. So I started I said, if I do $97 for 1 hour of coaching, probably a lot of people are going to try it. Plus, I didn't know what I was offering. I didn't even know why they should pay $97. Like, what were they going to get? I didn't know what I was doing. Or I didn't think I knew what I was doing. So the $97 brought in a bunch of people. So that was great. And then also a lot of these real estate companies, I spoke for free. I wasn't getting paid. I mean, eventually at times I did, but I wasn't originally getting paid. So any opportunity to be in front of people, to share my thoughts and opinions and insights, like it was their gift to me to listen to me because I didn't have a shtick yet. And in doing it so many times, I created a very solid shtick because I would record all my presentations, and then I would notice when people would clap, and then I would notice when people were really inspired by something. So I would take those chunks and put them in the next presentation. And so I was very methodical about it, but I started at $97. Eventually I had the courage to go to $150. Like I got a few people in 97. So I was like, if more people come, it's going to be 150. And then I was like, if more people are going to come, it's going to be 250. And then if more people are going to come, it's going to be 350. But every time I raised my rates, I panicked that nobody would come.
Yeah.
And so it was a tough process for me to do that. But I encourage anyone who's starting a new business. Sometimes people have this pie in the sky fantasies and they're waiting for this like big lump sum jackpot thing to happen. And I tell people who are like, I want to be a life coach. I'm like, go do it for free. Nobody wants to do it for free. And I'm like, I've done so many free things, and doing so many free things eventually landed me on TV. So you're too arrogant and you're not humble enough and you're not willing to pay the price. So sit there and lick your wounds. You're not going to get anywhere. So I think it's important to have, like, start with a financial number that you can live with, because subconsciously, if that number is so big that you can't even relate to it or believe it, you won't be able to sell it. So my self-concept was so tiny that at that time I could relate to $97. Like I could see my worth at that number. So I was able to sell that till I built more confidence to ask for more. And then I was getting the challenge of, why would I pay you $350 for a coaching call if I can go to a therapist and pay $30 copay? Right. So there were those types of challenges as well. And I'm like, well, but by that point in time, I had helped so many people really grow their business and multiply their income that I wasn't necessarily succumbing to those types of things. And I told people, I'm like, if you think you can get better somewhere else, go. Right. But it was stepwise of building it. And then of course my fee is a lot higher now.
I love that.
Thank you.
And I mean, like, technically with you, they were getting some of the doctoral expertise anyway. I think, like, this is the thing. I love that you said start where you start. Because when people say, oh, I'm starting over, what am I going to do? I'm like, no. You're not starting over. You're starting from here, which means you're starting with the knowledge that you have. Like, I'm a computer scientist. I bring that into everything 100%. That I do business wise. So the systematic thinking, so to think of how to be in charge of someone's health in the way that you study. So maybe you didn't go off and practice being a doctor in that way. However, you know what it means to take care of somebody's health. You just said, I understand post-op operations and pre-op, post-op, and operation post-op, right? That pre-op, right? You're talking about phases of life coaching. That operations moment, you're talking about stages of life coaching. The post-op moment, right? You're talking about stages of life coaching.
It's so smart. What you're saying is so good. When I left medicine, I was like, I wasted 12 years of my life, was what I kept telling myself. I should have been there. I should have had the strength. I should have had the courage. I should have left, but I didn't. I was broken inside. I couldn't have done it. So theoretically, yes, I should have, but I was so bruised and battered and destroyed psychologically that I was lucky that I was able to even do that. But you're totally right, because in the beginning, I was like, I wasted 12 years. I wasted 12 years. And what I realized in coaching, every skill set, discipline, everything, that hard work, a work ethic, caring about people, showing up when I didn't feel like it, everything that medicine had prepared me allowed me to literally catapult really quickly in coaching. And so I catapulted from my $97 offer to the $350 was in 1 year. And then I had so many clients, I was turning people away because I didn't know what to do with them. And so you're one of the key things that I got from medicine that really, really actually helps my coaching. Whenever I've shared this, even in a corporate setting, in a real estate setting, everyone's like, oh, like they get this story. So I tell them one of the things, although I hated medicine, there was one thing that I loved, and I worked in cosmetic surgery, and I loved the before and after. I just loved the aesthetic part. I thought it was pretty. I could relate to it. I was excited for the person. So like I had all this joy around their joy. But in an operating room, so typically what happens is you have, in cosmetic surgery, you have the before picture of the patient, and then typically you ask them to bring their preferred after. So if someone's getting a breast augmentation, you say, what do you want to look like after? If they're getting a facelift, what do you want to look like after? So typically you have these two pictures side by side in the operating room, the patient's on the table, and the entire team, our whole goal is to get them from the pre-op picture to look like the post-op picture. And coaching is exactly the same. Someone comes, I'm looking at their before picture, which is their now picture, and I'm saying, what's your after picture? And once we identify the after picture, it's so much easier to get there. So a lot of times when it comes to coaching, people just don't know their after picture. They're just like so sad about their current picture. And there's wallowing and disappointment and frustration. Like, I don't like my boyfriend, or I'm having an issue with my kids, or something with the job or with the money. They're so fixated on the current picture, what I call the before picture. They spend zero time in cultivating the after picture. So the same way I did it in the operating room is the same way I'm doing it with a client now. They come with their, I call it the before picture, the now picture. We become super clear on what's your after picture. And then taking steps that will get them closer to that and not sitting there and psychoanalyzing and analysis paralysis of like, why am I in that story?
Right.
That's not going to help you. It's not going to help you move forward.
No, 100%. And so many people get like intuitive hits and then move without the visioning process. Right. So I've heard people say like, oh, I'm going to quit my job. I heard, I got the intuitive hit, or I got the message from God and I need to quit my job. Okay, great. Okay. Now go back to God and go back to your intuition and ask when.
Yeah, and you got to get the strategy and the tactics, because you got to.
That's right.
So this pie in the sky, like, oh, it's a trend to quit your job before you have a plan about what you want to do, I think is super short-sighted.
Yeah, 100%. A couple of things I want to point out that you said, though, is you said, start where you start.
Yes.
Study yourself. When I hear you talking about like, oh, I noticed these things were happening, these human behaviors with the consumers or the customers, and then these things that I could probably do for my company wise, what I'm hearing you say is study yourself. And then I think one of the things I loved is that you talked about setting triggers. You like, if this many people come, I'm going to do this. If this many people come, it's going to go to this price. If this many people come, this other thing is going to happen. So I think that it is just so great to have those things come to you in the middle of doing all the work. Because there's also a sort of like, I'm curious from you, the difference between mindset and self-esteem. Like, how do you explain like, and not that they definitely rely on each other, but like, what's the difference? Is my mindset my self-esteem? Is my self-esteem my mindset? Is my self-esteem dictated by my mindset? Is my mindset, like what, how do you pull them apart? Do you keep it? Wait, hold that thought, because that's a big question. We got to get a break.
Okay, good.
And if we hop into that right now, we're going to be down a rabbit hole. And I want to hear so much of that, because I feel like people just say so many things. Yes. Oh, you got to think bigger about yourself. You got to go bigger, go harder. And they give you all this like high level, big talk. And then you walk away like.
Not actionable. You don't know what to do with it.
What was I supposed to do?
Yeah.
Am I feeling good about myself? And so I'm curious about the mindset versus self-esteem, or the two together. I'm also curious about like some of these steps that you took for your personal self to like move out of the trauma, and then some of those steps you give your clients. So keep it locked right here. Y'all don't want to miss the rest of this conversation. Hold on, we'll be right back. You listen to the Omi Show. It is Sunday. It is noon. I am Omi Bell. Thank you for joining us. Keep it locked right here. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thank you for joining. You listen to the Omi Show. I am Omi Bell, and I am here with Vivace Maxvictor, and we are talking all about self-esteem. We're talking about real estate. We're talking about how you can be better at what you do, better at being you. I think is one of the keys to what you bring in your life coaching and what I'm hearing you say. So let's get into it. So before the break, we were talking about what is the difference between mindset and self-esteem, or how they play together. And then I want to hear more about how you took steps for you to get to a place of being able to coach others.
Sure. So I think as far as the self-esteem is like, how much do you value yourself? What do you think of yourself? I think when someone's self-esteem is damaged, it's a tall order to say you should have a great mindset. It's really, really hard. But I do think they're building blocks. So if somebody comes to me and says, hey, their self-esteem is a 2 out of 10, my goal for them is to get them to 2.5. And I think that is a really, really important distinction, because people look, oh, I'm a 2, it's so far from a 10, but you're not that far from 2.5. And so the mindset of how do I get to 2.5? And then the mindset of how do I get to 3? How do I get to 4? I think if we make it incremental and something that is manageable, something that is believable, to say if you had, and I do this with clients where if their self-esteem, let's say if somebody is a 2, I'm like, well, if your self-esteem was a 2.5, what would you do differently? I would do this, and this, and this. Okay, which one do you want to start with? Well, I don't want to know those other ones because they scare me, but this one's the least scary. Let's do that this week, right? And it's to build, but the mindset is to believe that you're worthy of more, you deserve more, you can have more. And the only thing you have to change is to change your thought process. And one thing that I also learned from medicine that's been really helpful in coaching is this concept of neural plasticity, which means you can rewire your brain. So if your brain is wired to think of your self-esteem as a 2, you can rewire it to grow it, to think of it as a 5 or an 8, or hopefully eventually a 10. We're not, one of the things that I do in my program, Self-Confidence After Trauma is, and am I allowed to use foul language here?
Use all the foul language. Now it is Sunday, but use all the foul language you like.
Okay, good.
Be
well,
free.
Like one of my main things because of all the trauma that I had been through, I just felt like I was fucked for life. Like there was no way to fix it. And this is why I was suicidal. My pain level was so extraordinary. I couldn't get the pain to go away. And the pain was just like consuming me. And so with Self-Confidence After Trauma, one of my main points with clients is you're not fucked for life. And just having that mindset of saying, I feel fucked up right now. I feel really hurt right now. I feel damaged right now. I feel wounded right now. I feel stuck right now. But that doesn't mean I'm going to be like that till perpetuity. This is just one brain map that is a dominant default brain map that's firing in my brain right now, but I could create a new brain map, which is literally what I do all day. And then the reason I even posted my backstory on YouTube, which it's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, which is to put that story out there, was people would come to see me present at companies and they say, you're so confident, you're so this, you're so that. I'm like, yeah, but that came from the pits of despair. So I put that video up there to say, hey, here's the arc of my story. That was my brain map back then when I was tortured and traumatized and paralyzed by fear, and I couldn't do anything, and my self-worth was a 0, and I felt less than, and I felt like a second-class citizen, and all the negative things that I had been told that I was. I believed a lot of it. And so, but I didn't have to for the rest of my life. And so I think to make incremental steps of whatever number your self-esteem is at, or your income, if your income is at the next level, what would it be like if you made 20% more? What would you be willing to do differently? What are some skill sets you need to learn? I think all of this, like there's a formula to it. It's not as airy-fairy as, oh, I don't know what to do. So I had a client yesterday, she's an attorney, she wants to make more money. And I said, what's the next step? Let's figure out what's the next bump up. And she said this, and I was like, okay, what are all the skill sets you need to learn for someone to pay you that? So we wrote down the skill sets and I said, great, that's your homework till our next session. And so it becomes actionable and it builds the self-esteem because then you believe that you could do something about it. I think a lot of times our self-esteem is damaged because of things that have happened to it. And then on top of that, we feel powerless in the moment to do something about it. So we feel like that's it, but that's not it. Like there's so much more beauty and magic in you. And I believe that like our power is it's locked underneath our trauma. So if I help someone with heal their trauma, like all their power just keeps coming out. And so I'm really excited about the self-esteem after trauma, and my process is to do what I did with myself. And I was like the worst of the worst. Because by the time someone, at least for me, picking my own expiration date, I was a few days away from it. And then a girlfriend of mine suggested that I go get a brain scan, and I got a brain scan, and the brain scan was helpful. So like I did what I could to help myself, but I was having a panic attack on the airplane going to the brain scan place because it was in another state. I was overwhelmed with incredible amount of pain. And I think a lot of times when public thinks about someone being suicidal, their perception is like someone who's depressed. And that was not my experience. My experience is I had so much pain. I couldn't tolerate the pain. And I say the pain is like a jackhammer that you wake up in the morning and it's loud, but every minute it gets louder throughout the day. By the end of the day, you just can't take it. And so that's the level of pain. So my brain was wired very wonky because of the amount of trauma that I had. I got wired wonky. And so, but that doesn't mean that that's your self-esteem till perpetuity. That means that's your self-esteem, and let's build and build and build and have the mindset. Listen to stories of other empowering men, women, whoever that inspires you, that say, hey, if they did it, there's hope for me. And then what's just like the next homework for me?
Yeah, I love that you're saying you're talking about incremental shifts.
Yes.
I have a thing where I say like small doable actions. So when you're talking about you're saying like, oh, where your self-esteem is at a 2, how can you be 2.5? Because it's funny. Like I used to ask kids, I used to be a teacher, and I would ask the kids like, oh, like, what are your goals? And they're like, oh, I want to go to the NBA. I'm like, well, can you just finish all of your homework for the next week?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I want to graduate from college and I want to go on to be XYZ. And it's like, hey, that's great, but like if you could just make A's on these exams for this next quarter, we can get there. You're only in middle school, right? Like, and so
Yes.
I think that like being okay with where you are is helpful in where you're gonna go next and taking those steps to go next. And it's like you don't have to settle for where you are, but just noticing where you are now so that you can incrementally take steps to move forward.
Yeah, and I think also when you're saying, as far as being a life coach, if anyone wants to hire a life coach, for the love of God, ask them this one question before you whip out your credit card. You have to ask this one question. It will save you so much time and so much money and so many resources. I say if someone wants to coach you, ask them what is the greatest transformation that they created in their own life. And if that story knocks your socks off, give them your credit card. But if they haven't done anything in their own life and they think they're an Instagram life coach or a TikTok life coach or whatever these nonsense, everyone's a life coach nowadays. These people don't have clients. These people haven't transformed anything in their own life. It's all rhetoric and, being a quote unquote influencer. But if you can't influence yourself to transform your own greatest pain into power, you do not have the right to do it for other people.
Woo! You just said a mouthful. Okay,
yeah, I have so much rage around this because I went to so many different types of therapist coaches, whoever I went to, right? And a lot of them couldn't help me. And I was suicidal at the time. And I remember I would sit with these people and I would think to myself, like, I know I'm fucked in the head, but these people are more fucked up than me, right? I'm here for help and you cannot help me because you haven't done your homework. And I want to believe you can help me because I'm so desperate for help. And what is challenging is people who go to a therapist or a life coach, and then they don't get the help they want because it's not the right match for them. And then they feel there's something wrong with them. And I tell people finding a life coach or a therapist, in my opinion, is like dating. You have to find the one that's the right fit for you. Don't go to someone who has I went to plenty of people who had accolades who I could not connect with. I didn't resonate with them. I didn't feel like they got me. They weren't able to be helpful with me. And then I felt bad. More bad about myself, as if I needed to feel more bad about myself. And so to find someone who's your person, and how do you know who's your person? Someone who's actually achieved and transformed the thing that you're trying to achieve and transform. So if they haven't done it for themselves, why are they going to do it for you? So there's this concept, and this is why I have so much like passion and rage at the same time around this. There's a concept, it's called the unhealed healer. And I 99% of these people on Instagram or YouTube or wherever they are, TikTok, are fake ass people, and they're unhealed healers, and they're giving people wrong information, false hope. The whole thing is based on falsehood. And again, if you can't transform your own scenario, STF you till you figure it out.
You know what? I love that so much because here's I think a difference between being a life coach and a therapist, right? So as a therapist, you're trained, and that you don't have to have had any transformation. I think what's so key about what you have said is that for a life coach, when you're finding the right one, it is, have they gone through transformations in their own life? There's something else that comes. Okay, so I'm curious from you. What is the different energy that comes, from your standpoint in that transformation? Because we may not have the same story, but the fact that you've gone through transformations, what do you think is that energy that comes from people who have gone through transformations that make them a great life coach?
It's the authenticity. You've been down the path. You already know. You've been through the pits of despair. You've already challenged yourself. You already were willing to give up. You already had no faith in yourself. How did you build yourself up? I want that recipe. I want someone to show me how to cook who's already baked an amazing cake, not someone who's never baked a cake and is telling me, to combine sugar and flour together and stick it in the oven because they heard some other life coach say that. So I want to know, what have you done? So for me, authenticity is extremely important. And I'm paying people, like my life coach, I've been going to her for years and years and years. And she sadly had a lot of sexual trauma. And so she understands, like her courage and her transformation was a light for me. It was a magical thing. Like when she said, I hear you and I understand you, she heard me and she understood me. Not because she read some book in Psychology 101, but because she's been there and she's been through that. She's on the other side of it, so she can hold the torch for me to like look at her torch and walk towards her. And so I think it's extremely important. Go to someone who's already traveled the path. You have such little time in life. Why waste your time listening to 10 schmoes who've never done anything to transform their own pain, and yet they're espousing rhetoric to you? I just find it completely unacceptable and disgusting and self-serving, and it's not okay. And a lot of people who listen to these people follow the nonsense that they're espousing because it's cool and trendy. Just sit there and do law of attraction. You can do all the law of attraction that you want. If you have unhealed trauma, you are going to attract more trauma. You have to heal yourself to attract something better. So this stuff drives me bananas, because every time I went to one of these whoever guru type people, and these were people who were recommended, right?
Yeah.
Every time I went, like, I had so much faith and hope, and I put my faith and hope in them instead of God. And then I changed and I said, you know what? I'm going to put my faith and hope in God. And I'm going to go with resonance. And I picked my life coach. So this is a fun little story. I was dating this guy, and I wanted to come off as like, I had like this incredible schedule, and I had so much to do. So I took a class, an all-day class, just so I would be able to tell him that I took a class, like, oh, I'm in class all day. It was a Saturday class on intuition. And he's like, wow, you're taking a class? I was like, yes, but I literally took it so I'd have that to say to him. So I'm being honest about that. And she was the instructor of the class. And I was like, I like this lady. And so I was like, let me do one session with this lady. And I did the one session with that lady, and I've been with her for years because she's my person and she gets me, and she's been with me through my transformation, a lot of my transformation. I mean, I met her after the suicide time, but I met her through very challenging times also. She really helped me. But like, find a person who's been there and done that. And again, if you saw her, you would probably be like, wait, this is your life coach? She's a sacred gift. She is like, even for a lot of my clients, I'm their secret weapon. I was on with a TV producer yesterday, and she asked me to name some of my high profile clients. And I said, well, a lot of them won't allow me to use their name. Right. Like, I'm their secret weapon. I'm not allowed to use their name. So some of them are in the public domain. Some of them you can't use, but you can find someone who is not famous and who is, as far as a life coach, and who is so good and who's going to be dedicated to your transformation. So find someone who's been there, who's done that, you feel a total resonance with. And if you believe in God and if you believe in a higher power, make sure that they do too, so that they can encourage you to activate your own higher power, so you can download your own intuition from your own higher power to the point you won't even need a life coach if you really have access to God.
Okay. You dropping gems today. Like, if you have access to God, you won't even need a life coach. Use your intuition. I lead my organization with intuition. Also, we trained our entire team on how to use their intuition because it's so important. So I love that. Well, listen,
I tell my clients that. I'm like, whenever I'm on a coaching call with a client, and in the beginning, I was afraid to say this because I'm like, they're going to think I'm Looney Tunes. But over time, as I stepped more into because I came from science. So in science, you don't talk about God.
Yeah, right.
Then I was in a corporate environment, and I'm like, if I bring up the God word, they're going to be like, this girl's crazy. So I would literally talk about money instead of God, and then they would listen. So I would just kept talking about money. But my whole thing was like, and then I would like slip in a little bit, like, your higher power will show you, and then let's talk more about money. So it worked. But now that I've done this for 11 years, and I have a whole bunch of clients, and I have international clients, like, now that I'm confident and I'm not fear-based, I talk about God all the time. And I tell people, I'm like, listen, when we're on a coaching call, it's me and my higher power, and you and your higher power. And if I put my ego aside and I literally listen to everything my higher power is going to say, I'm going to coach you really effectively. And I want you to hear what your higher power has to say. So one of my coaching clients, this is like one of my favorite compliments of all time. She says, Vivace, you hear our higher power before we do. And then you tell us what our higher power said, because a client will say something magical. And I'm like, oh, did you hear what you just said? And they're like, wait, what? And I repeat back what they said. And I'm like, write this down. Your higher power just told you this. You don't even need me. Just write that down and go do what your higher power told you. And so on a coaching call, many times I'm like, your higher power just said this, write it down, write it down, write it down, write it down. By the time they get off the phone, they have a whole list of whatever their higher power told them. And I'm like, don't listen to me. And plus, when I coach people, I'm like, anything I say to you, cross-check it with your higher power. If your higher power agrees, then listen to me. If your higher power disagrees, it's not right for you, don't do it. So, and ultimately, the purpose of coaching is to coach someone, in my opinion, to listen to their higher power, at which point you don't need me, just go listen to your higher power. But until then, come to me and I got you.
what, I mean, who knows? They may enhance hearing from their higher power by working with you, right? So I think it goes hand in hand. Listen, thank you so much for joining me. We could talk all night, I'm
All
sure.
day.
Whenever where are you based?
I'm in Manhattan. I'm in New York. That's the
Okay,
58th
okay.
Street Bridge right there.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So we'll have to at some point. I'm in New York time to time. We'll have to get together. This has been great. I loved it. This has
I
been
love it too. Thank
fantastic.
you so much for having me. Thank you, your whole team.
Where can we find you on social?
So best ways on Instagram, it's at Vivace Maxvictor. And then my website is Fierce, Fierce, fierceselfconfidence.com. And then you'll find more about self-confidence after trauma on there too.
fierceselfconfidence.com. I love that.
Thank
You have been
you.
listening to the Omi Show. I am Omi Bell. Make sure you're back here every Sunday. You miss a Sunday, you miss a lot. Text hey to 202-918-4483 to join the community. Hey to 202-918-4483 to join the community. Thank y'all so much. I appreciate you every Sunday being right here with me. This is Sirius XM Urban View, channel 126, where talk empowers and becomes action. We'll see you next week.